I feel like we should just plug it in there instead.
Yeah, that's a better idea. Okay, well, here we go.
Yeah.
The way this channel is gonna work.
Oh no, I was just gonna set it up just like this and just let it roll.
They're cutting too. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So the way this panel is gonna work, I'm gonna give a brief rundown on labor in the U.S. and comics. We're going to introduce our
put it back there, and we'll put it.
And then we're gonna do some questions. And then we're gonna hopefully take some audience questions. I'm gonna try to do this as fast as humanly possible. Here's a very speedy background as to why there aren't freelance unions. One, the Freelancers Union, which you've probably heard of, is actually not a union. It's a nonprofit advocacy group created before Obamacare that provided a healthcare marketplace for freelancers. The main reason the U.S. doesn't have a freelancers union is that in 1946, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed, which fucks over workers and unions in many ways, and was passed after decades of labor agitation in the U.S., it excludes any individual who has the status of an independent contractor from unionizing, as basically colluding on prices is seen as price fixing, so it's an antitrust law. What that means is every freelancer is considered a business, so if we're all like, oh, like a comic should cost $1,000, it's seen as basically we're the same as a large conglomerate of corporations price fixing, which sucks. Groups like the Writers Guild were grandfathered into the law because they were made before it was passed. It also excludes a lot of things, including things like farm workers and domestic workers weren't able to unionize, but luckily there's been a lot of labor organizing around that, and recently in New York State, farm workers just won the right to unionize, and just this past week, domestic workers in Philadelphia did as well. Which is amazing, and so there is history of trying to repeal this law. Currently, the only presidential candidate that's talked about it, I think, is Bernie Sanders. He wants to repeal the part of it which deals with right-to-work laws, which I'm not going to get into. But so far, no one's really said anything about the contract worker part. And then, so today, we've seen surges of organizing both labor rights and other issues in comics and media. In the past, 50 or so years, there's definitely been spurts of unionization efforts, all of which have either failed due to just kind of fading out or due to firings and blacklisting of employees. Within comics in the past couple of decades, there's been a ton of organizing around creating safer work environments and breaking down traditional gatekeeping, which is great. And actually places like Kickstarter have broken down a lot of the traditional gatekeeping, which, let's shout out Kickstarter's original idea, and then also, unfortunately, that means we have to talk about what's going on with Kickstarter right now. Kickstarter workers have attempted to unionize, and Kickstarter retaliated by firing 3 of their employees, and are currently still extremely hostile to union negotiations. So let's just also give a round of applause to all the Kickstarter employees. And also a round of applause to all the GMG union members who quit Deadspin. And so recently within comics last year, we saw the Festival Workers Association, which OK has been a part of, there's a lot of conversation about that last year, which was great, with lots of demands about making comic festivals more democratic and transparent. And this year we saw some changes to CAB, including a list of where money from tables was going to, which is great. I also helped organize a letter along with Michael DeForge and Sage Kersing demanding the severance of ties between SPX and Comixology, which is owned by Amazon. Which I hopefully don't need to go into that. Before the letter could be published, SPX quietly removed their Comixology sponsorship, but their relationship remains unknown, and other festivals are still sponsored by Comixology. And then also there's been organization around price transparency. There are websites like Creator Resource and another page rate website for comics, and also a new website called Lightbox, which gives information about rates. So we're in a pretty unprecedented time in regards to organizing in general, and definitely in regards to media and comics, so we're going to talk about it. So all the way over on the right is Matt Lubchansky, who is the associate editor of The Nib and a cartoonist and illustrator living in Queens, New York. Their work has appeared in the New York Magazine, Vice, Eater, Mad, Gothamist, The Toast, Hairpin, Brooklyn Magazine, and their webcomic, Please Listen to Me. They are the co-author of Dad Magazine. Next to Matt, next to Matt, I'm so sorry. Laura Lannes is a cartoonist and illustrator from Brazil living in New York. Her comic, John Deere, was published by Retrofit Comics. I also wanted to add that Laura has a comic in the newest comic journal about feelings of alienation and labor in regards to commercial art making. It rules. And OK Fox co-hosts the Art and Labor podcast, which is an amazing podcast, alongside fellow art worker Lucia Love. Find them on artandlaborpodcast.com or Twitter @artandlabor. And my name is Colleen Tighe. I'm an illustrator and cartoonist living in Brooklyn, New York. As an illustrator, I've worked for places like the New York Times, the New Yorker, NBC News, other places. I still produce zines, and I've worked on long-form nonfiction for the Nib comics. And we're going to start with a personal question, which is, on a kind of personal level, what are the main challenges that you feel like you face working within the comics industry? Whoever has the mic wants to start.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Okay, the personal issues that I'm facing?
Yeah.
I think, okay. I mean, I think it's probably expectation of work from people who aren't, almost every editor I have is not an illustrator or cartoonist, and sort of their expectation of the time with which something can be turned around, the number of edits they could give me, the rate. I would get offered consulting rates almost weekly from some big legacy publication that thinks they can publish, they can give you $100 for a one-page comic, which is completely unacceptable if you don't know.
I mean, should I rush?
A little bit.
I mean, for anybody here who's a cartoonist and you have to go to cons, right, to sell your work, I mean, how profitable are you? You know, how good is that system? I think it's pretty terrible. It took me a lot of years to start making money because I have to pay for my ticket to a con, I have to pay for the table, I have to stay at a hotel, and I, couldn't sometimes even break even. There's not a lot of money in comics. I work in illustration too, and there's not a lot more money in illustration. These are both fields that are undergoing massive devaluation. Big mistake for me to work in both. There's no union, there's nobody who can defend you if you get stiffed by a company, which has happened to me multiple times, and you have to sue them. It's all on me alone as an individual to try to, get the money that I worked for. I could go on and on. These are not easy fields to work in, and they're fields that have very low levels of unionization and worker protection.
So I'm not a cartoonist, but I organize comics and zine festivals. And I organized Zine Feast at SUNY Purchase and Paper Jazz at the Silent Barn. And the point of those festivals was specifically to make it as profitable as possible for the people tabling. So our whole goal was to try to figure out a structure that could keep costs as low as possible to, like Laura was saying, the travel expenses, the table fees, all these things are already so gutting at a day where you're there for 11 to 7 or 6, and how much is that? How much are you actually making an hour when you're sitting there all day working? You have to make it as worth it as possible for the exhibitors, because the exhibitors are what make the event. It's the exhibitors that bring the crowds. Oftentimes these festivals don't actually do a lot of outreach, promotion, these sort of things. It's reliant on the exhibitors to bring the crowds and to make the festival what it is. And it's in that way, it's important to make it as little as possible, which is totally possible. I've done it many times, and people can do it by working through institutions, which will often give space for free. Libraries will give space for free, often have tables for free, or you can rent them very cheaply. You can be very clear with your exhibitors and the public about how much you're actually paying for the space, and then people can be like, well, why? When we have these other spaces that are free, why are we going to these ones that charge so much, and then that cost gets passed on to the exhibitors, for example. So that's kind of where I've been coming from in my area of that. But if people are interested in the Zine Feast, is still going. It's at SUNY Purchase, and they pay travel stipends for the exhibitors to come and enrich the students at the public college. There's money that is, raised through a mandatory student activity fee that all of the students pay into. That then, students can decide what to do with that. There's plenty of other institutions that you can work with to do stuff like that.
Okay. And in your experiences, how do you think the comics industry generally, over the period of time that you've been working in it, has become worse or better?
Probably much worse.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of illustration because I also work as an illustrator. I have read about old illustration rates, and people used to buy houses with the money they made from illustration. You could get like $5,000 for, a spread or a cover or something like that. I guess some places you still could, but I think that was like the average. Whereas, when I graduated, I was offered jobs where I would do illustrations for $25, and I know that's still going on. I know accomplished illustrators and artists who still take, $40 illustration gigs. I think comics is very similar. I think comics is worse, actually. When I think about advances that I've heard of people getting for graphic novels, I don't know if it has to do with the internet and Kickstarter, but I feel like publishers expect you to take less money now than they used to, maybe because sales have gone down for them. Just very rough.
There is a pretty big surge, I would just say, in money in comics right now, from the publisher side. So that's just something to consider also when we talk about this. Especially one-day comics right now, it's like a huge, huge, huge boom. And they're making a ton of money off of it.
It's not like, even with that huge boom, it's not like page rates have skyrocketed or anything. It's still like the amount of work you have to do to pitch a graphic novel to a traditional publisher is insane. You have to write an outline, you've got to write on a one-pager, you've got to do character designs, layouts, you've got to maybe do a sample chapter, which is like 15 to 25 pages. It's like a month, that's a month and a half, 2 months of work if you work really fast. And for a 10 or 15 grand advance, it's insane. You have to, it's all on spec, and hopefully you'll get it picked up. It's that money's not translating, it's not trickling down or whatever the hell. I think the comics industry has gotten, some of it's gotten better, I think, because things like, there are more book deals with traditional publishers if you're doing like weird indie stuff, but otherwise, I think a lot of the money's been completely sucked out of doing work online. It used to be you could do a webcomic and you could make a living off ads. That's gone, thanks to Google mainly. You used to be able to do, I was thinking, I was writing my bio for this and thinking about all the websites that I did editorial illustration for that have been shut down. And that's getting worse and worse, and more things all the time are going out of business. All the people ask me for advice or whatever, and all the websites I used to pitch are dead, are gone because they weren't financially viable, or some private equity monsters destroyed it, or whatever. It's not a...
Yeah, and I was going to ask this question, but I don't think we have time to get into it, but I think it's worth considering also how we're going to fund these things in the future, because more and more as we continue, these corporations and CEOs are just going to keep mismanaging the money, and the media landscape is basically dying. There really isn't money in media anymore, and we're going to have to start strategizing ways to fund these projects and fund ourselves, because they're all systematically being killed off. As we saw in Deadspin, as we see basically throughout the past 20 years, and I don't know what the answer to that is. But I think something we can ask, and then we'll ask some audience questions. What do you view kind of an ideal future within cartooning? Like, what would make our lives easier?
I'm holding the microphone. I would say worker-owned and reader-supported stuff. You know, like, that's what happened to us at the NIT, basically, is everyone here is cool, right? Because I signed some NDAs that are violating probably by talking about this, but like they asked us for basically no reason because an idiot had to have an idea at a meeting, and they wanted to launch a streaming video app on Apple TV, basically, and that's where our budget went. But you know, we're reader supported now. We're pulling in almost what we did, almost what our freelance budget from First Look was, just from reader donations, and that's still not enough for our editorial time, so we're still kind of like publishing less than we're supposed to be. But basically now we own it, cartoonists are in charge of it, all the money's coming from readers, and I think that's sort of like where things need to go in terms of like home for comics, in terms of illustration and other stuff that we would still be gold in the legacy media. I think it's unions and labor organizing.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, worker-owned stuff. Why should we need Patreon taking a cut? You know, why should our livelihood depend on that middleman? Same with Kickstarter. Definitely unions. We're freelancers. We need protections. I mean, so many of us shouldn't even be freelancers. So many people are permalancers and they work 9 to 5 every day, but they have no benefits, you know, and they have the same level of insecurity as someone like me as a freelancer. And no way to like negotiate pay rate because you're a freelancer, so you can just be dropped. I think an ideal future for illustration and comics is worker-owned cons, unions. We have to have a sense of solidarity. We have to understand ourselves as workers. I think people often think of themselves as artists, and you're on your own like path, you know, to be like Picasso. But really, you're a worker, and you're being exploited, and you're getting ripped off, just like everybody else. We have to have a sense of solidarity to understand that, like with Deadspin, you know, you're journalists, but it's the same fucking thing. You know, journalists get really shit money if you look at their website where writers get paid or something like that. It's not different from illustration. It's not different from comics. It's the same capitalistic exploitation. They want as much work as they can get from you for as little as they possibly can, and they will keep lowering wages if nobody stops them or, you know, pushes back.
Yeah, getting off Patreon and Kickstarter, I think, is a good like long-term goal because they are increasing the rates, right? We saw Patreon be like, okay, after this cutoff, everybody knew it's going to be at this rate. But don't worry, all the people already on it is at the low rate. And that's how they got, because like before, every time they would be like, oh, we're going to raise the rate, everyone would be like, oh, we're leaving. And so like to appease that, they were like, oh, well, everyone's still on it, it's going to be the same, but all the new people is going to be. So it's like, we can't be tied up in these private companies. If we had our own worker cooperative models or like reader-supported things that are built outside of these big tech companies, it could be a lot better for folks.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, we will just continue. Okay, do you want to come up here? Okay.
Do you know if anyone's trying to set up a open source or public alternative to Patreon and Kickstarter?
Okay, so that is an open source alternative to Patreon and Kickstarter. Does anyone know?
Some of the folks from Silent Barn started one called With Friends, but they're mostly for venues and spaces, like physical spaces. And I don't know if they're gonna. I've had some conversations with them. I don't know what their future is. I don't know if they're gonna get. They're talking to me about like some sort of progressive VCs, like progressive women of color owned VCs, and I'm like, I don't know, guys. I don't know if that's the answer either. So I don't know if anyone. You guys know?
No.
Okay, does anyone else have a question?
What's a VC?
Oh, venture.
Venture capitalist. venture capital.
I mean, I was just going to say, with regards to Patreon and Kickstarter, there's also perhaps, I mean, this is a less explored avenue, but, you know, in terms of feeling solidarity with your other cartoonists as workers, is like unionizing or collectively bargaining as people who have work on those platforms, that they wouldn't exist without our work and our labor.
Yeah.
So there's you know, boycotts, strikes from putting stuff on Patreon. Like we could affect what their business practices are if there's a better sense of, you know, it's all crabs in a barrel shit, right? Like,
Well, it did work before. Like,
yeah, it did. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And we just got to keep doing it every time they try it, because they're going to keep trying it, because they know their energy to raise the rates is unlimited. Our energy to fight it is more restricted because we're trying to make a living, and, you know.
Courtney?
Are there any unions that freelancers can join right now?
What a great question, Courtney!
Oh my God. Currently, under the NWU, there's something called the Freelancers, the National Writers Union, which is under the UAW.
United Auto Workers.
Yeah.
Who just ended their strike.
Big up to them.
Congrats to them for a 5-week strike.
Oh, yeah. But the Freelancer Solidarity Project is open to basically all digital media workers. I'm in it. Colleen's in it. They just elected their first committees. They just had the first elections, and there's a meeting, I think, on Tuesday. But just come to a meeting. A lot of it is writers right now, but they're open to all digital media workers. That's illustrators, cartoonists, photographers, videographers, podcasters. Am I forgetting anything? And yeah, anybody who's doing work that is like could be classified as digital media work, come to a meeting. The more cartoonists and illustrators we have there, the more the union's priorities will be for cartoonists and illustrators. So you don't have to join immediately, but it's also like a sliding scale, pay what you can union. It's nice to be in a union. Yeah. One more minute. One more question.
Yeah, one more question.
Yes. When are the meetings and where?
Okay. So the next meeting is Tuesday at 7. Okay. Anyone who wants to know the exact address of the meeting, just come talk to me because I don't know where exactly it is. It's at the UAW offices. Okay, David.
It's not at the UAW offices, which are on 38th and 6th Street. For the exact address, just come to me or call me.
Yeah, you can talk to David Turner. He is a writer that's at the Freelance Solidarity Project, and he's great. Or you can talk to me, or you can talk to Matt. We're all part of the Freelance Solidarity Project, which I would say is one of the most important things to start to do. So I was doing some research today about unions in comics, and basically in 1968, DC writers attempted to unionize and were fired and blacklisted. It also kind of broke the workflow. Basically, before then, it was a pretty stable. If you were a writer and an artist, you worked with the same editor, and you worked with them for years into decades. Once they purged all these people, it became freelance. So I think that's an important thing to consider. And something that they said in the interviews, this was conducted in 1998, is that the artists did not join them. And they didn't join them because they were making a fuck ton more money than the writers were at that point. And what happened was, after that, the rate of living went up, cost of living went up, rates did not go up, and the artists came back to the writers and were like, we really fucked up. Some of them did. And they're basically like, it's kind of too late at this point, the time has passed. And that's also, I think I want to kind of emphasize right now. We cannot control the environment we're in. Everything, you basically get fucking lucky. It's mostly luck and just being prepared to take advantage of a time. And we're in a time that's like, there's clearly a ton of energy, and we really need to harness it. And I feel, I want to give a huge shout out to all the people that have been on the left and organizing in labor and trying to do this for decades before this moment, because it was really hard, it was really isolating. And I just kind of want to, I think we can just end it now, and I want to close out on a quote from that article from one of the DC writers. His name is Arnold Drake, who's a writer, who's a co-creator of the Doom Patrol and creator of Dead Man. And this was him speaking in 1998. It was apparently an idea whose time had not come. Maybe it's right now, but it doesn't look like anyone is going to bother to do it. Now they're making the mistake of saying, we don't need it. We've got everything we want. That's dumb. What you need is recognition. You need to be dealt with as a group, not as individuals. What the freelancers have gained hasn't been taken. It's been given to them, and that which is gratuitously given to you can just as easily be snatched back. So if the whole field is going to become truly legitimate, the writers and the artists will one day get together and take what's rightfully theirs by speaking with a single voice instead of trying to go in and negotiate one by one. Thanks to all.